So I thought I'd bring a little family business into the public square because it is Thanksgiving weekend, and that seems appropriate. You know, Ram Dass says, if you think you're enlightened, go spend time with your family. We have our own version of that here. You know, if you think you're enlightened, come rub up against folks at Bodhi. So it's perfect. You know, one of our community members said, okay, I'm gonna set up the altar. Now, where's the elephant? Well, it is an elephant, but it's also known as Lord Ganesh, the remover of obstacles. So if you didn't know that this was actually a deity out of the Hindu tradition, now you know. It's more than just, like, maybe you've been sitting out there saying, why does she love to have an elephant up there? Nothing about the elephant. Lord Ganesh is the remover of obstacles. So as we come together, we could actually invoke the presence of Lord Ganesh. We could invoke the spirit that removes seeming obstacles. So let us go to the Hindu tradition. The ignorant man desires material things. The intelligent man desires enlightenment. But the wise man just loves and receives everything. You know, there's so much there. The ignorant man desires material things. Now, at first glance, what you could make that mean is stuff. But actually, the deeper meaning of the ignorant man desires material things means you're looking to the world for approval. You're looking to the world for safety, security, for validation, to have the world tell you you're okay. The intelligent man desires enlightenment. So always seeking. Maybe if I take this workshop, maybe if I read this book, maybe if I meditate for 5 more minutes. In fact, I'd like you to know that I meditate an hour a day because I'm enlightened. But the wise man just loves and receives everything. That is a deep practice. And it is a simple practice, but not always an easy practice. Last Sunday, as I sat in that seat, I stirred. What was stirring in me was a desire to walk out. See, there was a man that sat front and center, a community member. And he had posted a Facebook post, and I was advised to not engage with it. But you can imagine how well I do that. Not so well. And part of the reason that is because I actually think that how could we be curious? You know, like, if I just ignore it, we don't actually get to deal with the thing. And I'm someone who I really like to know that the container has integrity. So if there's something off in the container, it's hard for me to sit with it. And I was noticing as I was sitting there last week that I was really attached to feeling comfortable. And I wasn't feeling comfortable. There were some things that were posted on Facebook that it was like, ouch. And as strong as I may seem, as funny as I may be, like, I actually I have feelings, you know? And so when people say things that I interpret as assuming I am without feelings, there's an ouch over here. So I just didn't want to look at him, you know? I didn't want to, it was like looking at him was like an ouch over and over and over again. But something in me knew that if I got up and walked out, that was not the solution either. And so I had to sit with the discomfort. You know, don't you have those moments where you would rather just get to comfort quickly? It's like, who really wants to sit through the discomfort? And yet discomfort always produces something. So I thought that I would share some of the Facebook post and provide some context. Because, and I'd really love for you to hear this as like an exploration curiosity, not an exercise in being right about anything. You know, one of my favorite commitments from the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership is commitment number 10. Would you be willing to consider that the opposite of your story is as true or truer than your story? And that's like, we really love our stories. I really love my stories. And by the way, they're right and they're good. So, but let's consider this story, right? So this strange new Bodhi. And by the way, if you are here for the first time or you never plan on coming back, just be like the vigil holder. You're just holding the place of peace. We called you in. Our soul called you in and asked you to be here to hold the high watch so that we wouldn't go down the rabbit hole. So thanks for being here. This is no longer the spiritual center I joined in March of 2014. Lola has hired a marketing consultant and intends to create a new brand as a global center for consciousness. And because Bodhi Spiritual Center is a terrible name for what she has in mind, I predict she will change it sometime in 2019, probably at the same time she disaffiliates from the Centers for Spiritual Living. And this is what the new t-shirt might say: reveal anger, dishonor white males, and celebrate self-righteousness. So a couple things. I do have a great desire to see this community evolve into a global center for consciousness. That's really true. And I'm excited about that. And it's important to know that nothing occurs here as an edict. You know, there's an incredible board of directors. There's a ridiculous staff. There's an incredible body of leaders that generously contribute their thoughts, feelings, and opinions all the time. So this is always happening in concert with lots of people. And it's also true, we have hired a marketing firm to help us get clear on our messaging. And want to hear the good news? That firm is owned by a community member. It's called Popskull. And it's owned by a guy named PJ Rashid, who gives of his time so generously. In fact, you could say hi to him most Sundays at the information station. Tall, glasses, really nice. Say hi. His name is PJ. He owns Popskull Agency. We've hired him because he's an expert in something that I'm not an expert in. So how can we language who we're here to be in the most powerful way possible? Now, all of that is sort of content, but I want to get to reveal anger, dishonor white males, and celebrate self-righteousness, because that really jumped out at me. And the first one, is it true? Is it true that Lola is interested in revealing anger? I would say that's true. I would say that's true. That is, I believe, one of my superpowers. And I think that it's actually an important one, because I actually think that so much of humanity is like brimming with anger and stuffing it down, and as a result, things come out sideways. And so what I'm a proponent of is, how could we consciously move anger? Like, stuff has happened in your life. Stuff has happened on the planet. And to pretend that anger is not acceptable is a dominant cultural norm that is used to suppress discomfort, to suppress uncomfortable feelings. You are a vessel. Anger moves through you. Joy moves through you. Sexual energy moves through you. Fear moves through you. Sadness moves through you. Would we be willing to honor all of that? I doubt that PJ will say reveal anger would be a great tagline. I don't think that will happen, so I think we are okay there. But I do believe that revealing anger is a powerful, powerful expression And I believe that there's a way to do it consciously, and I believe that there's a way to do it unconsciously. Dishonoring white males. Wow, I really had to sit with that one. That was the one that really jumped out at me. And I'll tell you what's true for me. And by the way, anytime I'm exploring over here on Planet Lola, the invitation is for you to explore, how might this be true for me? How might this be true? So this isn't about Lola. This is just about me using Planet Lola as a petri dish. And you could use your own petri dish. Like, take a breath and ask yourself, is it true that I dishonor white males? And if you're like, I can't even believe I'm sitting in here asking this question, I want to scream, great, let's just breathe again. So here are my thoughts about that. I spent 20 years screaming at white people. That's true. And really what that was about was there was something that I felt I could see in the consciousness of white America that I felt needed a transformation. And the best that I could do for about 2 decades was scream about it. You know, I mean, not literally, but you know how you can scream even if you're talking? And I had lots of facts, lots of data, lots of history, lots of texts to support my position. And guess how effective that was? Not very effective. Turns out human beings don't like to be shouted at, even if you're right. Now remember, don't get seduced by my own story of being right, but I do like my story. So, over the last several years, what has occurred to me is that after I realized shouting at white people wasn't effective to forward the racial consciousness in this country, I just decided to leave them alone. I mean, like, I would spend time with you if you were here, and I sleep with a white man every night. I birthed a white boy, you know, like, I am around white men. But it's like, sort of like, you know, hey, Nathan, you're good, you know? But then you have to get honest with yourself and say, how is keeping someone or something separate from myself and outside of myself keeping the whole game alive? And so I realized that actually my curation of my life, maybe you made it in, maybe you didn't make it in, was really just my own self-indulgent exercise. It wasn't actually me being a part of a greater solution. It wasn't me being cause in the matter. So if I have a desire to see the racial consciousness of this country evolve, which by the way, there's mounting evidence of a readiness for, there's actually, like, you know, you could go and watch the SNL skit that Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock did right after the Trump election. It's brilliant, and it's very telling. Oh, there's a readiness. Certain people are willing to look at something that previously weren't willing to look at. And could you hear that and not make yourself wrong? Could you just take a deep breath and go, there's a conversation up in the collective consciousness of humanity around race? And might we consider exploring it? Not from the position of victim, villain, hero. I'm right, you're wrong, but look, we're all in this thing together. How do we want to work this out? And I oftentimes say you cannot shift what you cannot accept. So if we can't accept what has occurred in this country, we will always resist it, and what you resist persists. So there is great reason to do some truth and reconciliation work in this country. There's great value in having honest conversations. So let's get back. Is there something in me that dishonors white males? Oh, I'm sure it's still in there. I'm sure it's still in there. And would you be willing to extend grace as I walk on my path in the same way that I extend grace as you walk on your path? Also, probably not going to make it onto the next t-shirt, but available for the wisdom. Because here's what I'm most committed to. You all know I created a project called Normal White People. I'm deeply committed to having conversations with white people around developing their racial consciousness, because I think it's wanted and needed. We had 26 white identified people in the last offering of Normal White People. It was so powerful to hear people put voice to things that they've never felt like they could say or ask or dismantle or disrupt. We're babies at this. White people have been trained not to talk about race. And yet it's speaking every word we say. So it's just something to untangle. Celebrate self-righteousness. Good wisdom. Always something for me to be mindful of. Always something for each of us to be mindful of. Would I be willing to consider that the opposite of my story is as true or truer than my story? If I get caught up in my hurt feelings about a post, very little is possible on the other side of it. But if I can see all of life as my ally, how is this for me? How is this for me? How is this post for me? Michael Beckwith said to me once when we were together a few months ago, he said, "My practice is to see the Christ in all I meet." And what he's saying is to see the anointed one, to see the higher self in all I meet. So am I looking for evidence of someone's broken ego, or am I looking for evidence of one's high and holy nature? Am I looking to see the Christ, to see the higher self in all I meet? So I want to weave this into our existing tagline, because it really caused me to sit with, if the concern is reveal anger, dishonor white males, and celebrate self-righteousness, but for 15 years what we've been talking about is reveal love, honor all paths, celebrate life. Let's talk about what that actually means. All right, so reveal love. To become consciously aware of a higher order in all things. That's what I'm talking about. What's the higher order in the Facebook post? What's the higher order in the struggle that is before you? Just take a deep breath and close your eyes for a moment, if you would. See if you can bring to your mind's eye something that has, in the past, really bothered you. Like it was like an obstacle. It was something that you couldn't figure out a way to navigate. It created discomfort. It created disturbance. Take a deep breath. And see if you can sense the higher order in that thing. What is the higher order in that thing for you? Go ahead and open your eyes. It may have produced greater compassion in you. It may have produced greater generosity in you. It may have, softened your edges a little bit. There is good in all things. To reveal means to see that which is hidden. Love means the self-givingness of the infinite. To see that which is unseen. To see in the unseen realm the self-givingness of the Spirit, of the infinite. To reveal love. This philosopher who I love would always say, there is nothing to heal, only God to be revealed. So if you have done the work to deconstruct the idea of God that perhaps you were raised in, only God to be revealed. Only, Emerson said, God and love are synonymous. So there is nothing to be healed. There's only love to be revealed. Can you hear when someone's hurting, it's a call for love? And if I match hurt with hurt, what have I yielded? Nothing. So let's talk about honor all paths. To regard the course of awakening with great respect. This is the one that I think we can really misunderstand. You know, I called Mark Anthony over the weekend, who's the founder of Bodhi. He founded it 15 years ago. And I said, I'm just curious, when you said honor all paths, what did you mean? Like, I have an idea of what it means to me, but I'm curious, you're the guy who said it. So what'd you mean when you said that? And he said, it really just was the idea that there are many roads to God. There are many roads to this universe. There are many paths, many traditions, many paths to love. Many paths to love. So I just want us to be mindful, you know, and we all have to do our own reconciliation around this, but the most loving thing I could do last Sunday was just to sit there and breathe. That was the best I could do. Just sit there and breathe. Most loving thing I could do for myself, most loving thing I could do for the other people involved, just breathe. That was the path that I could take, the honoring of my awakened self. See, my hurt self wanted to leave. Can you think of a time where something in your life, it was the hurt one in you that wanted to leave? It wasn't your higher self. Now, there are times where your higher self says, honey, we got enough of this one. Can we move on? You know, but always to discern, what is the path of love that I could take here? What is the path of love that I could take here? Would I be willing to soften my ego for just a moment? The ego's going to jump up because it's scared. It's scared, and it wants to kill off anything that looks like a threat. That's your reptilian brain. You're hardwired for that. Threat. And sometimes that serves us. The child goes to touch the stove. That serves us. But watch when the ego starts to take over, and it's going to kill off anything it doesn't like in its path. What is an alternative? To take a deep breath. That's my practice. Let me take a deep breath. Let me invite my higher self to reveal itself now. And all I can do is breathe and honor the presence of love that is right where I am. The Bhagavad Gita, in the spirit of honoring all paths, if you can see God in everyone, you can never do harm to anyone. That's the premise of oneness. That is the philosophy upon which this community is built. So, Global Center for Consciousness, Center for Spiritual Living, the philosophy is there is a unity in back of all things. That is what the great seers of history have shared in common. There is a shared unity in back of all things. It is an illusion that we are separate, and out of the seduction of our separation, we create suffering. So I have to ask myself, where am I seduced by separation, and where can I align myself with a higher idea of what I am and who I am? If I think that this is the most real thing, you hear me say this all the time, if this is the most real thing, it's the source of great suffering. If I understand that this is a catalyst, it is a channel for me to be on a path of and for love, generosity, possibility, and I can have my anger in that process too. That's a powerful path. Ernest Holmes wrote in this book called The Art of Life, if you think of life as always bringing to you everything you need, you will have formed a partnership with the invisible, which will prosper you in everything you do. So if you think of life as always bringing to you everything you need, you will have formed a partnership with the invisible. When I read this post, how is this post my ally? How is this post for me? What is the wisdom here in my soul's evolution? Because believe me, the thought did come out of my mouth, oh, you messed with the wrong family. Because look, there's like and I have a big, tall brother who decided to jump in on the Facebook post and had a moment of like, I'll meet you at the bike racks. Oh, geez, there we go. But that's my family. And then we have to go, it's okay, just scared. Just scared. It's all right, take a breath. Take a breath. Take a breath. So the Facebook post goes on to say, New Thought is a weak theology for social justice warfare. Justice is not a God quality and does not feature prominently in the science of mind. In my experience, New Thought is mostly about prosperity, healing, and relationships. If I were setting out to design an activist church focused on issues of social justice, I would start elsewhere, perhaps a liberal Catholic model or something Pentecostal, but not Bodhi. I listened to Lola's October 7th talk, and she had to twist Ernest Holmes into a pretzel to serve her agenda. If Lola wants to pretend to be a cross between Beyonce and Nelson Mandela, I was like, you got me! You totally nailed it! That was like the highlight for me. I was like, yes, yes. She will need to adopt some version of Black liberation theology. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that Bodhi has stopped training spiritual practitioners. So a couple things here. This is not a science of mind purist center. It never has been in 15 years. This community has always marched to the beat of its own drum. So we love the science of mind. That was a brilliant, brilliant writing by a guy named Ernest Holmes, but there are an infinite number of brilliant writings. There are some crazy things that Ernest Holmes also said. So, in fact, some of it had to be edited out of the book because in 2018, that just would not work. So nobody's trying to turn Ernest Holmes or the science of mind into any kind of deity. You're the one, baby. There is nothing outside of you that has greater wisdom or authority than that which is within you. That's what this community stands to be about. Turning it back to you over and over again. The presence of all that is within you. The presence of all that is within you. The presence of all that is within you. Beyonce and Nelson Mandela, like I said, that felt really good to me. And Black liberation theology, I would say the only tweak I would make there is Black liberation philosophy. That was an essential part of my own spiritual awakening, which I talk about with great pride and reverence and appreciation for. When I read books like Soul on Ice and The Miseducation of the Negro and the autobiography of Assata Shakur, when I was 13 and 14, my mind blew open. Those texts caused an entire awakening in me that I am forever grateful. But it's important to understand this. I'm going to post this on Facebook for anybody who's interested. Great article by a New Thought historian, which I should also tell you, I have very little devotion to the New Thought movement. I have no devotion to any movement other than that which stirs my soul. I don't identify as a Republican. I don't identify as a Democrat. I think those are problematic in a lot of ways. But since the topic of New Thought was brought up, and for some that's important, we'll go to today's leading historian on the New Thought movement in an article titled The Hidden History of New Thought. In the late 19th and early 20th century, there was a marriage between the movements of alternative spirituality and radical politics. A lot of the people who occupied those worlds overlapped among those two cultures, experimenting with new expressions in religion and politics. For example, Marcus Garvey. Anybody know who Marcus Garvey is? Okay, great. If you don't, thank you to the American public education system. Go ahead and look it up. Garvey is rarely seen as a figure with any kind of spiritual leanings. People think of him as a black nationalist, a promoter of a certain sense of racial pride and individual esteem, but his writings and speeches were steeped in New Thought language. He was drinking from those waters. Women were yearning to have a voice within the civic and political culture. Naturally, they were also suffragists, part of the voting rights movement. You had a belief among people like pioneering feminist Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Garvey, and Booker T. Washington that there were possibilities for the individual to improve his or her circumstances in the culture, both on a personal level and as a part of a group constituency. They united these impulses and felt that you could advocate for an expansion of civil rights, economic justice, and voting rights, and you should aspire to personal economic freedom, whether that meant owning a business or becoming educated in a profession or a master tradesman or master craftsman. This explosive intersection between New Thought and the liberal, progressive vision of social justice went underground in the 1930s and 1940s as New Thought began to be seen as a royal road for individuals to achieve mainstream economic success. So, the New Thought movement was adapted from its liberal, progressive vision that was heavily influenced by socialists. So I'm right on the mark. I bring that up because it's easy for us to point the finger and say, you're wrong. And I just ask us to pause in this climate that's all about digging our heels in. And let's just take a breath. Number one, make sure that what you're saying is accurate. You know, I've had to send some Facebook messages when people do a post and it's like, that is just not true. And then we go to Snopes, oh, not true on Snopes. Okay, take down the face. Take a breath. Do you know what you're giving your word to? What is it rooted in? And what path of love is it coming from? The New Thought movement has deep roots in social justice. It was largely inspired by abolitionists and suffragists in this country. So when I talk about race in America, we're right on track. And if that triggers you, I ask you, would you be willing to take a breath and say, how is that which she is saying, which I find deeply provoking and super uncomfortable, how might that be true? Would I be willing to consider that the opposite of my story is as true or truer? Celebrate life. To joyfully acknowledge the animating principle of being. You can create an experience of joy independent of circumstances and conditions. It's your greatest power center. You are not a puppet being pulled by some external authority. There is not a carrot being dangled before you. You can celebrate life as it is right now. If nothing were to change in your life, could you celebrate life exactly as it is right now? With all the perceived dysfunction, with all the perceived breakdown, would I be willing to celebrate life as it is? Thich Nhat Hanh said, I am aware that happiness depends on my mental attitude and not on external conditions. I am aware that happiness depends on my mental attitude and not on external conditions. And finally, it's a mistake to teach people to think of themselves as white and then shame them for it. I believe that what Lola is doing is deeply counterproductive. It will undo decades of racial progress in America. The right way to dissolve racism is to give up our attachment to being in any particular group, or at least any group smaller than America as a whole. Perhaps someday we can expand that to include the entire human race. The problem with White Women Get Woke, it's actually great copy. You can go to the Facebook post and read it. And Normal White People is it teaches people to identify as white so as to make them wrong. It then blames them for events that happened long before they were born and stigmatizes their very being. I cannot think of a faster way to create racial division and provoke an organized counterattack. Lola is playing with fire and doesn't even know it's hot. Okay. I do know it's hot. It's very clear in this country it's hot. It's been hot for a long time. And what I'm always asking us to consider is, could we look at our identity and understand we are not only our identity? So you actually have the capacity to look at your identity, even though it was like our race was made up. Got that. But there have been deep implications to the construct of race in America. And to just jump over that is something that won't work at this point. And as much as we would all love to just get over it, it's just not that simple. There are real implications to the manufacturing of race. And I trust that humanity is mature enough spiritually to rise up and look at the thing that is uncomfortable. It's a young part of us that doesn't want to sit in discomfort. It's a young part of me that wants to get up from the chair and say, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this. It's uncomfortable. But you know what? There are lots of things that are uncomfortable, and it won't kill us. It will kill us to not look. It will kill us to not look. And it could be a long, slow, uncomfortable death. But you cannot shift what you cannot accept. You cannot shift what you cannot accept. Bodhi Spiritual Center is a divine idea in the mind of the cosmos. There is a unique conversation that occurs in this place and space. To be a place that can look at the intersection of consciousness through the application onto individual and collective issues is really essential. Because the way that we are going to move into a new paradigm, a new state of consciousness, is not with the old tools. It's not with the old paradigm. So we, as a collective, could go, wow, I feel like there's some wisdom that's showing up for me on the planet right now. If I identify as white, and I hear that there's an upset around race in America, and I don't get it, then the opportunity would be to get curious, to actually go, how could the opposite of my story be as true or truer than my story? Because I'm being run by a story. But what else could be true here? So I'm very excited about this community's willingness to explore race, gender, class through the lens of consciousness. I actually think that this could be a global center that births a new paradigm. You know, the Dalai Lama is talking about the religions of the past aren't going to be the thing. What is needed is a global secular ethic, because we get too trapped in I'm right and you're wrong. We can transcend that, but it requires us moving through some uncomfortable spaces. And it requires us not taking everything so personally. Racism in America is not personal. It's business. It's not about you. And you're deeply embedded in it. We all are. So we could rise up from our adolescent place and space and go, how could I be a contribution on the planet? That's what this community is here to be about. A contribution on the planet, to reveal love, to honor all paths, and to celebrate life. So happy 15th anniversary, Bodhi.